numbers are counting up. Hey folks, we're just letting people into the webinar, and just give us a few minutes. When the numbers stop moving up, I will start introductions. Okay, it looks like the queue has entered the webinar, so because the number stopped moving, so it looks like everybody who is lined up is in. So I'm going to get started. I'm sure a few more people are going to log on. Let's see. All right, we are good. Okay, so my name is Rachel Kinder, and I'm the Frameworks Director at Mission West Virginia. And thank you for joining us tonight for our webinar on discipline, what I'm calling Discipline Plus, because Nikki's going to talk about DHHR discipline policy, but also lots of different techniques for working with your kids on discipline and behavior and all those issues. Nikki works for Mission West Virginia as the family liaison for the Relatives as Parents program. That's a warm line that assists relative and kinship caregivers. And she also, in her other job, is a Pride trainer. She's been doing that for quite a long time. And she's also the adoptive mom of 8 kids. So she's got lots of experience there. So I'm going to turn this over to Nikki. Just a few housekeeping rules. If you have a question, type it in the chat box. If it's relevant to what Nikki's covering at the time, I will interrupt and ask your question. And then we're going to try to wrap up right at 8. And at that point, we will start taking general questions if you have any. So let's, here you go, Nikki, go for it.
All right, can you guys hear me? We're good? Is my microphone working?
I can hear you, Nikki.
Okay, cool deal, thank you. So like Rachel said, my name's Nikki Snuffer. I do a lot of different jobs, but probably my most important job is adoptive mother of 8 kids, right? Just a little background before we jump into everything. Of my 8 kids, they're all ages. My oldest son's 20, and my youngest daughter's 5. So we've seen a whole broad spectrum of behaviors and a lot of stuff you can all probably sympathize with, and maybe a few things that you guys haven't experienced yet. So today, to start off with, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges you may have when it comes to discipline for your own kids. So with children in foster care, before they come into our homes, what we see a lot of is inconsistent parenting, right? That's probably the number one problem when it comes to disciplining children, is that before they've come into your home, discipline has been inconsistent, right? So it causes a lot of problems. So that's a challenge. A lot of times with general foster care, you want to build a relationship with a child, and when they're misbehaving, you feel like disciplining them is going to put it on the slow track, or maybe even stop that relationship you're trying to build with the child, because then you have to step in and be disciplinarian, and they may not attach like you want them to. So there's another challenge that not everybody faces. A lot of children, some children, not a lot, will have extreme behaviors due to past trauma, and this is something my family has had to handle with a couple of our children, and that we've had to work through. And that's definitely a big challenge if a child's having an extreme behavior for very little minor infractions when it comes to house rules. And then, of course, another one is a lot of people want to kind of cut these little ones or older ones breaks because they've been through a lot, right? Their history. Some of these kids have faced a lot in their life that more than most adults, right? They've already been through enough in their 5 years, 6 years, ever how old they are, than most adults, So you may feel like, hey, I'll cut them a break because they've been through a lot. But really, you owe it to them to hold them to the same standard as other kids. And that's what they want. That's what all kids want. They want to be just the same as everybody else. And so by you holding them to that same standard, it's going to help them out a lot more in the long run, even though you feel like you're being a bad guy right now. So we're gonna go a little deeper into that in a minute. So before we even get into the good part on discipline, I'm going to read you, and bear with me because I'm reading it. DHHR's see, already messing up, policy on discipline. I'm thinking about reading it. So first and foremost, punishments of a physical nature, including hitting on the body in any manner or any punishment that subjects a child to verbal abuse, ridicule, humiliation, shaming, disgracing, belittling, intimidation, or destroying a child's sense of self-worth, including any remarks made about a child's biological parents or family, is strictly prohibited. We've all heard that. You guys all should have signed this discipline policy when the children were placed in your home. So you can't spank them. Basically, that's do not use physical punishment on these children. We teach kids that their bodies are precious, and that sends mixed messages if you're spanking them and telling them how precious their bodies are, right? You're not really treating their bodies very preciously if you're spanking them and hurting them for disciplinary measure. So don't do it. Verbal abuse, obviously no. Ridicule, humiliation, shaming, disgracing, belittling, or intimidation, all that stuff. Their self-esteem is already low. They've been removed from their parents' home, their biological parents' home, or wherever they were living before, and now they live with you. So their self-esteem's low. So we need to build them up, not put them down. So this is not going to be a very effective form of discipline. Any remarks made about the child's biological parents, it seems obvious, but again, rules are here for a reason. It's been done, I'm sure, more times than I'd like to think about. You never want to say anything bad about their biological parents anyway. They will battle with this their whole life. Like I said, my oldest son that we've adopted, he's 20. He's battled it his whole life because people feel like they need to be loyal, right? Who do they need to be loyal to? Well, they can be loyal to both sides, biological parents, adoptive parents, grandparents, kinship relatives, whoever's taking care of them. But they feel a lot of times like they can only be loyal to one at a time, right? Kind of makes sense. So when we or anybody says something about their biological parents, even if they're mad at them for whatever happened, that's still their biological parents, right? So you never use that for discipline. Never talk bad about their biological parents, despite, you may not like their biological parents, but you can still never tell the child that their whole life. In anger, in a moment of just chit chat, talking to them, never say anything bad about their biological parents. Because even if that moment they're telling you that they're angry at them and you agree and get on the bandwagon and talk whatever, later down the road, they might not be mad at them and they're going to remember what you said. And so it's just a good practice in general, never to say anything bad about biological parents. So number 2, punishments involving denying food, clothing, shelter, or bedding, keeping the child out of school, locking the child in any enclosed space, administering medication not prescribed to the child, or withholding a program service or provision outlined in the service plan is strictly prohibited. We get asked a lot of times in class, this is the big one, and bear with me on it. A lot of people will say, if I give this child medication, I'm supposed to give it to it before bed, but it just amps them up and they're up all night every time I give them this medication. So I decided I'm going to stop giving them this medication myself that the doctor prescribed. You can't do that. Okay? You can't. And you know what's best for that child. I'm not arguing that, but you're not their doctor. Okay, you cannot just take a child off of medication because the way it's affecting. You can't do it, but you can talk to their doctor about it. The doctor has to take them off any kind of medication. Point blank, period, end of discussion. You can't do it. You're not a doctor, don't do it. Don't lock them in anything. Dog crates, outbuildings, bedrooms. Don't do it. Again, it wouldn't be a rule if it didn't happen. Don't do it. Obvious reasons for that, right? food. A lot of people, and I don't even have to ask for a show of hands on this. I know a lot of you have trouble getting them to eat food that's not frozen or potato chips, probably, right? Chicken nuggets, frozen pizza, potato chips, everything, because that's what they're used to eating. That's what they like. Hey, it tastes better than what's good for them a lot of times. And so they say, if we feed them dinner and they don't eat, I don't want to send them to bed hungry. You're not denying them food. You're not, because you made them a dinner, right? They'll eat the dinner. They will. A thing that we do, because we have picky eaters. 8 kids, 8 different appetites for food, right? I have kids that hate hot dogs. I have kids that love hot dogs. I have kids that'll sit and eat a carrot all day. And I have another kid that if you show them a carrot, they'll act like they're dying and gag. But when I cook dinner, they eat dinner because they know that's dinner. That's what they're going to get for dinner. If they need a snack later, well, you don't need a snack. Your dinner's still in there. If they don't eat their dinner, we all sit together and eat dinner. And if they don't eat their dinner, we put it in their microwave for them in case they get a little hungry later. And they'll get a little hungry later. And if they give it a good, good try, a good 2-3 bites and try it, and they honestly do not like them, then yeah, then we'll talk about eating something else. But we do not deny food, and that's not denying food because you're saving them their dinner. It's a battle of will at this point. And so you just keep that dinner available for them. You're not denying food. Children shall be disciplined by foster adoptive parents with kindness and understanding. That's kind of an easy one, right? Foster adoptive parents shall use disciplinary measures designed to and carried out in such a way as to help a child develop self-control and assume responsibility for his or her own actions. Okay, so with that one, we always give a warning. They get one warning, they know after that warning, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. With that warning, hey, we're going to go in a grocery store. Pick a toy out, because they have them right there when you go in and right there when you check out, right? All shiny, and the kids just gravitate to them. Hey, go ahead and pick something out if you want. I'm not above bribery. Sometimes, and if good, they deserve it. I like to reward good behavior. I am a huge rewarder of good behavior. You can carry that toy around with you, but the second you act up, the toy's going back on the shelf because you don't deserve it anymore, do you? Because we're going to talk about it before we come in, and it works all the way down to toddlers. I'm telling you, once they learn, and it's easier to say, hold this until we're done, instead of waiting toward the end. That's what I found with my own kids. If I give it to them in the beginning and they lose it, they know more why they lost it. Okay, I was acting like that. That's why you took it away. Whereas at the end, no, you don't get that because you acted up in the store. That takes kind of away the illustration for them. They don't get the visual as much with that. So that works pretty well with us. Do they have tantrums? Yeah, they do. But when they have tantrums, you know what else happens if you have a tantrum? You get a standing timeout. And it stops a lot of that tantrums before it happens. We've had timeouts privately off to the side in a grocery store 1, 2, 10, 20, maybe 30 times with different kids. But once they know that you're going to have a timeout, this is the consequence for this action, and you don't waver on it. You can't ever waver. You have to stay consistent. Behaviors start getting better, especially in stores, because grocery stores are where you see a lot of meltdowns, right? Walmart, everybody loves Walmart. So let's see what the next one is. Simple, understandable rules shall be established by the foster adoptive parents. These rules shall set forth specific expectations for behavior and reward the appropriate behavior. I kind of just hit that pretty hard, right? But with rules, you have to keep them simple. They have to be simple so the youngest kid can understand them, right? Our rules in our house, everybody understands them, from the oldest who still lives at home, who's 17, down to the youngest, who's 5. And they understand them because they made them. We sat together each time we got a new child placed with us. We all sat down as a family, went over the rules, tried to figure out if we needed to change anything or add to. Never take away, because we kind of steer them toward the rules we want them to have, but we let the kids come up with the rules. It sounds crazy, right? It works. What kind of rules do you think we should have? Steer them if you have to. What about, if people are watching stuff they're not supposed to, throw up stuff maybe you've seen them do. All right, what do you think we should do when that happens? And kids, if they make the rules, they'll mind the rules better because it's their own rules. Hey, you came up with this rule. I'm just enforcing what you laid out for us. And they can hold themselves more accountable, and it teaches them self-control, and it teaches them more accountability for their own actions because they're the ones who made the rules. Does that make sense? Should. And then as far as, the reward and punishments for the behavior, they've set it forth too. Okay, you know that if you watch stuff on YouTube you're not supposed to watch, that's 2 weeks off YouTube. You made the rule. And they're going to be less likely to do it. I'm not saying they never break the rules, because they're going to break the rules. They break the rules less if they make the rules. And they break the rules a lot less if they understand the rules. So, discipline shall be related to the developmental stage of the child and in line with the child's ability to comply. We talk a lot in Pride about emotional age and physical age, right? And so that's what that means. If the child's 10-year-old, but they're more on a 6-year-old level, that rule needs to be more in line with what you would have for a 6-year-old. That way, it's going to be more appropriate and work for them better. Discipline shall be related to the child's action, handled without bias and without prolonged delay on the part of the foster adoptive parent. The child shall be aware of the relationship of the act to its consequences. Just talk to them. If you do this, if you do A, B is going to happen, and it has to be every time. And it has to be not 20 minutes later. It has to be as soon as the action's carried out. If it's a timeout, if it's something that needs a timeout, guess what? You got to do timeout then. You can't wait and be like, okay, when we get home, if they're acting out in public, it's got to be then. You don't want to make a big, huge public spectacle out of it. Okay. But you have to take care of it then, because then if you don't, they're going to try to get away with more and more and more each time you take them out. So, like I said, we've done timeouts in Walmart's, kind of in the corner, not with a lot of people watching. We've done it at the ball fields, kind of behind a dugout where there's not a lot of families and people walking back and forth. Find a discreet place to do it, because again, you don't want to embarrass them, right? We're not trying to push that self-esteem back down, but they do need to know that there are consequences for their action. And it, with the punishment, with the consequence, it has to be swift, or they're going to forget about it. Anybody would. Like, why am I in trouble now? I did this an hour ago. It has to be then. It has to be when the action, or when you find out about the bad behavior. The child may be given a timeout for a short period of time, if necessary, to help him regain control. When possible, the children should help set time limits. It's recommended that time limits be determined by the child's age and applying timeout for 1 minute of each year of the age of the child. So if they're 6 minutes, right? Timeout does not start, in our house anyway, until they're sitting still. So if you get up and walk around after you sit down a minute, the timer's going to start back over. So we have to actually sit still for 6 minutes. It is hard for a 6-year-old to sit still for 6 minutes. It's hard for me to sit still for 6 minutes. A trick to help with that is we have a bottle, kind of like an empty like pop bottle, tea bottle. And inside that bottle is like water and food dye and glitter and little stuff. And we super glued it. You got to hot glue it down? Hot glue it down hard. Because if they can get it open and they sit there for 10 minutes, then they're going to work and try to get it open. But we shake it up. Hey, just look at this and hang out for until we tell you to get up. And it helps keep them focused on something other than I'm going to be defiant of my parents and try to get up. For cars, it depends on what's going on. If it's a long trip, then what we do, because we take a lot of long trips, I don't know, those of you who know my family know we like to go. We stay gone. We go out west. We go to Oklahoma. They drove to Idaho, Texas. We go. Long trips, it's when we stop at the next stop, instead of getting pop like everybody else, you're going to get a water. We're not going to deny you something to drink, but you're not going to get a treat. You're not going to get candy for sure. We have to strategically seat people in the car sometimes, because sometimes it's hard. You know how when you get mad at somebody, you stay mad at somebody, and it's not going to go away that day probably. If the behavior is bad enough, I've pulled over to the side of the road and addressed the behavior, and we've stood on the side of the road in a safe place. You don't want to do it on the interstate. Exit, go to a little less trafficked highway, and put him in timeout, man. I found a pole, telephone pole, guardrail, whatever you have to do to set him in timeout. Make it safe. Say, if you don't stop, we're going to pull over and do timeout. Sounds crazy. I have 4 kids with something called ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder, which means you can tell them one thing, and if they have it in their head that something's a certain way, you're not going to convince them otherwise. And they're going to try to break every rule you can, and they do. They still do. but it's gotten better. You just have to stay consistent with it. And so if you say, hey, if you act this way in the car, I'm going to pull over, you got to pull over. You got to pull over. I mean, you got to, if you show the gun, you got to use it, so to speak. Okay. I mean, I've done it too. With teenagers or older kids who are old enough to talk back, don't get caught in a shouting match with them. That's rule number one for when they get big enough to backtalk you. Don't, because the rule with my wife and I is if we say it, we do it. We follow through. If I say I'm going to do it, it's going to happen. So we got super guilty of this a few years ago. My oldest daughter has oppositional defiance disorder. She has a lot of extreme behaviors. She misbehaved. I don't even remember what she did. And I said, I'm going to take your phone for a week if you don't stop backtalking. If you don't stop backtalking, your phone's gone for a week. And she said, fine, that's fine. You can take it for 2. And I said, all right, I'll take it for 2. And then we continued to battle back and forth. She kept pushing the line. And I kept adding a week. We took her phone for 1.5 years. It got to 1.5 years. I said, I'll take it for 1.5 years. And I had to follow through. And so guess who doesn't backtalk very much anymore? My oldest daughter, because we had to. If I tell you I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And 1.5 years is extreme. It was extreme. But again, you have to stick to your guns. If you say you're going to do something, they have to know that you're going to follow through with it. And it hurts you. It hurts them. Like, you don't want to do it. I didn't want to take her phone for 1.5 years. It's very inconvenient for everybody involved in the situation. But because I said I was going to do it, we did it. And so that's where consistency kind of helps with everything.
Hey, Nikki.
Yeah.
Before you move on, this is my question, actually, not an audience question. What do you do for a child that will not physically stay in timeout? Because I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to restrain them.
You don't. We've had that. We physically, set them back down. They get up. We're not going to hold them down, right? So that's fine. What we've done is turned off all the TVs in the house and everything, distraction that they want to do. They pick up a toy, we take it away and say, there's no playing until timeout's over. And sometimes, some of the battles will go on for a long time. It's a battle, but you have to win the battle. You have to. And Ethan, our youngest son, also has ODD, and he was very guilty of doing that when he was younger. He would not sit in timeout. He'd get up, do whatever. And we had the 7 other kids. All right, other kids, let's go. One of us will take him out. We just shut down the house. Anything you want to do, you can't do that. We're not playing until you do your time and time out. And just any kind of stimulation you could take away, that he'd be like, I found a stick on the ground. I'm going to talk to it. Nope, you don't get play the stick because there's no playing because you're in timeout. You have to do your timeout minutes first. And it's exhausting, but again, because you already laid it down, they're doing timeout. They have to do the timeout. So nothing else gets to happen. Does that help? That's what we've done.
That does help. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, folks, we're taking questions. So if it's related to what Nikki's talking about now, hit me up in the chat box. If it's something maybe not so related, there will definitely be Q&A time at the end. And hey, Nikki, when you, we can talk about this now or when you finish the discipline policy, we probably have folks on here that are with private agencies. And do you want to talk about like how DHHR policy is the minimum, but that their agencies may, vary?
Have more rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this, because I think some of you kind of logged in late too. So we're going over DHHR policy now, and DHHR policy is the minimum rules. So if you're with an agency, there's probably more rules and guidelines that the agency has that you have to follow. So what I'm covering is the minimum from DHHR. So just to clarify.
And I will send that out as an attachment after the webinar when I send out the certificate and all of that, since people may want to reference that. So, and all right, back to you.
Yeah, put it on your fridge. Put it on your fridge if you need to. We have stuff everywhere still to this day, and our kids have been adopted for years. So it helps us. It's a good reference to have. We're on timeout. Okay, let me look. Hold on. I don't have them memorized. I'm sorry. Behavior problems shall be treated individually and privately. If there is an assessment of a child's pattern of unacceptable behavior, the foster adoptive parent should be involved and cooperate in carrying out the specific behavior modification plan for the child. So sometimes behaviors are extreme. They get to be extreme. Been there, done that, right? I have. And sometimes you have to do a behavior modification plan. Sometimes you work with your therapist for it. Sometimes the child's worker will help with it. All kinds of agencies. There's so many different resources out there. I can't name them all, but they'll help you with this behavior modification plan. If they put the plan in place, you got to go by the plan. Bottom line, that's what it is. Where it says individually and privately, like I said, you have to follow through with what you told them with the timeouts. But like I also said, reiterated, right? We're in Walmart. We don't do it in the checkout line in front of everybody. We'll kind of take them off to a little discreet spot, and you're standing timeout over here in the fish aisle or whatever we're going to do where there's not a lot of people. Because we're not making a spectacle. Because remember, we're not trying to push that self-esteem down, right? We're not trying to embarrass them. We're just trying to make them face the consequences for their action. Denial of mail, phone calls, and or visits with family members will not be used as disciplinary measure, nor will the threat of removal from the home be used as a disciplinary measure. That is awful. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. Don't threaten to kick them out of your house if they keep asking away, even if it's teenagers. Okay, you can't. That's awful. Think about where they're at in their psyche. They've already been removed from their biological parents, and now you're threatening to remove them from your home, which may be the only safe place that they know. And so that is just a big blow to anybody. It'd be a big blow to anybody. And you're not allowed, just flat out, you can't deny phone calls or visits with family members if it's court ordered. You're not allowed to do it, and you shouldn't dangle that in front of the children to have them behave correctly anyway. That's just not good all around for their psyche. Foster adoptive parents are not to use or permit the use of any form of physical restraint of a child in their care. Use of restraints, except for placing a child in a chair for feeding or transportation, is strictly forbidden. What that means is you can put them in a high chair, you can put them in a car seat. That's it. Do not tie them to a chair. Don't tie them to a chair. Don't do that. Don't tie them to anything. They're not animals, they're children. Don't hold them down. Don't do any of that stuff. You cannot physically restrain them. You cannot use yourself to hold them in a place. Now, we get asked a lot, and we've done it, if a child is hurting themselves or someone else, and it's an extreme situation. Like I said, my oldest daughter, a lot of trauma in her background, would have these moments of like PTSD when she'd get in trouble. Little things would set her off, and she would take her hands and she'd rake them on her face till she bled. When she'd do that, we would stop her from doing that and say, stop, you're hurting yourself. But what you need to do in those situations, you need to call an ambulance because you can't restrain them and you don't want them to hurt yourself. When behavior gets that bad that they're hurting themselves or they're hurting another child or hurting you, because I'm telling you, I've had my clock cleaned by a kid a couple of times, and you can't safely stop them without having to physically restrain them for more than just a second to kind of, hey, stop for a second. You need to call an ambulance because they're trained. They're trained a lot better. And I don't care if you've been training through wherever you work, you need to call somebody else to do it. You're not going to be the one to restrain them. Because that's pretty just black and white. Each foster child must be supervised at all times unless the child is of an age and developmental ability to be left unsupervised. The child's worker will participate in the decision to leave the child unsupervised. Be very sure about this. And I'll tell you why in a minute. They need to be old enough to be left alone. They need to be cognitively old enough to be left alone too. Just because they're 14 doesn't mean they're responsible enough to be left home alone. Because 13 is not on here. I'm missing one. I'll just tell you, don't leave him home unsupervised. My oldest son, he was a teenager. We left him home unsupervised, came home. House was in one piece for a good long time. We thought we were doing good. Hey, we're giving him some responsibility. It was never more than 20, 30 minutes at a time. This is good for him. We're teaching some independence here, right? No. We found videos on YouTube of him letting off bottle rockets in our house, doing crazy stuff because they'll do stuff. Kids are kids. And, kind of be happy about them being kids, right? We didn't leave them home alone anymore. We knew better after that. 14. Foster adoptive parents will not allow children under the age of 12 to operate an all-terrain vehicle because you can't get your permit till after you're 12. Okay, now I know they have little kid ones. This is what DHHR policy says, so this is what I go by when I tell you I don't know the answer to can they drive a little kid one. It says here they can't. That's the policy. Foster adoptive parents will ensure that children aged 12 years and older do not operate an all-terrain vehicle without a certificate of completion of a vehicle rider awareness course as offered or approved by the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. During the operation of this activity, the child must wear protective gear and be closely supervised by an adult. See summary of West Virginia ATV law. That's what it says. That's the rule. They have, if they're over 12 and they want to drive an ATV and they're in foster care, they have to have that permit. That's what the policy says. And that's the minimum. So remember, if you're with an agency, it might be something more than that. Foster adoptive parents will assure that children are not passengers on all-terrain vehicles unless more than one passenger is allowed on the vehicle, specified by the manufacturer's recommendations, and the driver is an adult caretaker. See a summary of West Virginia's ATV laws. Again, that's DHHR's policy. So if you know your uncle's cousin's brother is the best four-wheeler driver in the state and they want to take the kids out, one, is that four-wheeler made for two people? Because a lot of them aren't made for passengers. They say it right there, big sticker, right? Two, is he the adult caretaker of that child? Not right now, he's not. And so that's the policy. I don't write the policy because people get mad at that. I don't write the policy. That's what the policy is. Sorry, squish the fun. That's what it is. So that's all I have for the policy part. So we're going to get into the kind of the meat and potatoes of tonight, which is discipline, right? Everybody always asks about discipline. So there's a huge difference between discipline and punishment. Okay, punishment is not all spankings and beating children. That's not all punishment is. Okay, timeout is considered a punishment. Grounding is a punishment. You can ground your child. You can put them in timeout. Not all punishment is bad. Discipline, when you think of it, a disciplined person, I always think of the military. Maybe because I'm in the military, I don't know. But when you think of a disciplined person, you think of somebody in the military, right? You know that military person is going to do the right thing. You'd hope, usually. So the disciplined military person always does the right thing, even when nobody's looking. They're huge on integrity, and that's what integrity is. Doing the right thing, even when nobody's around, make sure you're doing the right thing. And that's the goal we want for these kids. We want these kids to have integrity or discipline and do the right thing when we're not around. You know, the goal is for them to go to school and be able to sit in school all day and listen to the teacher and learn and not disrupt the rest of the class the whole time. That way everybody gets the full effect of school, especially once school gets back to normal and all the kids are back, right? And so in order for that to happen, they have to be disciplined. People get real, especially grandparents, and I'm sure I have grandparents on here that are probably just sitting back. They're kind of mad at the whole policy, and I understand it, because before your grandchildren were taken and placed with you, you probably gave them a little pat on the butt every now and then. You know, that's what you got when you were growing up. A lot of us did. I mean, I got spanked once or twice. I was a pretty good kid, but I mean, it happens with everybody. But when we were getting spanked, it was coming from a place of love, and there was direction with it. It wasn't all physical beatings, hopefully, for everybody. I mean, I'm sure maybe some people, but it wasn't all, we're going to spank you every day and do this. And you say, well, I'm the grandparent. I'm not going to do that. I'll tell you another story. I have 8 kids that are adopted. One of them is a sibling group of 6. When they first removed those kids from their bio parents, they were going to place them with their grandmother. Some things happened, then they didn't, thankfully. And a few years later, I got to meet their biological grandmother because we were in court because another baby was born. And I talked to the grandmother, and she was laughing. I was like, "Can you tell me some stories about the kids when they were younger? Because they want to hear it. We don't know anything about when they were babies. Any stories you have will be great." And she started laughing. She's like, "Oh gosh," and I was like, "Yes, here we go. Buckle up. You know, good stories." And she said, one time, and I'm going to just use her names now. She said, one time Dominic kicked the chair out from underneath me when I was holding a baby, and I fell on the ground. She goes, "Boy, I beat him till he bled. He was black and blue for weeks after that." And I said, "What?" I don't like this story. It's not a good story. Tell me something else. And she couldn't really think of very many things. And so I asked the kids, I was like, "Hey, I met your biological grandma today. What do you guys remember about her?" And they were like, well, she cooked good chicken. We like your chicken. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then Dominic kind of got quiet and he goes, one time she spanked me till I bled. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, the girls got in trouble and she was going to spank them, but I stopped her and said, just spank me instead. And she did. She spanked Dominic instead of spanking his sisters because he asked her to. Which you're like, good on Dom, but no, bad on grandma because she spanked him until he bled. And that's what he remembers. Those are the two memories they have of their grandmother. And, you guys, hopefully you're not like that. I don't know all of you, but also DHHR doesn't know all of you. It takes a while to get to know somebody on that level. So it's easier to say, don't spank your kids, even if you're grandma, even if you're the aunt, even your uncle. Don't spank them, not allowed, don't do it. Okay. Plus, again, we're trying to teach them that their bodies are precious. These kids have been through a lot of predators. It's like they have a big target on their back sometimes with these predators out there. And so we have to try very hard to teach them how precious their bodies are. Don't let people touch your body. Don't let people hurt your body. You're so special because they all are. And we're telling them this. And if we spank them after we're telling this, what kind of message is that sending to the kids? Your body's so precious, but I'm going to spank it because you ate a cookie before dinner or did whatever. It sends mixed signals. And so physical punishment is just not very effective. The reason kids get spoiled or act out is because it all goes back to that inconsistent parenting that I talked about right in the beginning. Kids don't act out because they don't get spanked. They act out because they know they're not going to get a very consistent parenting. They know, well, they let me push the lines this time, so I'm going to continue to push the lines because I might get away with it. It's not because I'm not going to get spanked. It's because there's not a consequence to their action. That's why when you set that consequence, you have to follow through with the consequence. Like I said, I said earlier, I have kids with that oppositional defiance disorder, ODD, right? And so if one of my kids with ODD, of course, I hold them all to the same standard. Let's say my rule in the house, and some of you have heard me say it, and I'm sorry if you have, put your shoes in the cubby when you come in. We have to do it. There's 10 people that live in our house, right? Okay. When you come in from school, take your shoes off, put them in the cubby. And for 100 days, those kids put their shoes in the cubby. And on the 101st day, one of the kids throws their shoe in the floor. That kid's in trouble. Even though they did so good for the 100 days and you want to cut them a break because they've done so good for the 100 days. The rule is you're in trouble if you throw them in the floor. So you have to be in trouble. And they have to know, because what happens if I give them a break that first time? What's going to happen on the next day? They're probably going to throw their shoes in the floor again because I got away with it yesterday, right? And once you start doing that, you see the old habits start coming back. And so it's up to us, and it is exhausting. You got to stay consistent with it, and it is exhausting. Believe me, I fight the battle still. Nobody's perfect, but we have a few tricks that we've picked up along the way with all these ODD children, I guess. So kids who have been exposed to trauma, they're going to have a little bit more extreme reaction sometimes. Some ways to kind of help combat that: simple rules, like I said earlier. We do simple rules. We post them all over the house. We put them in the bathroom so they can read it while they sit in the bathtub. There's no excuses. Kind of takes the excuse away that they didn't know it was a rule. Two, it also takes the excuse away when they help make the rules. It goes back to have them help make the rules and keep them simple. We also like to explain the rules. You have to be in by 10 because we'd like to know where you're at. I go to bed at 10:30 and I want to make sure all you guys are home and safe. If you're not home by 10, I'm going to go out looking for you because I don't know if you're in a ditch somewhere or where you're at. This is why. Make sure they understand the rules. Again, if you sit with them while you make them, they're going to understand it because you're going to talk about why. It takes the why out. Celebrate small victories is a huge one. If you have a kid, poor Ethan, I'm going to go back to him. When my youngest son was in pre-K, they'd put a happy face or sad face on their thumbs each day, depending on how their behaviors were. And every day, Ethan would come home with that sad face on his thumb. And he'd be like, sorry. And it was so sad. We felt so bad for him. And so we were like, maybe just try. Just try. Listen to your teacher for a day. What we got to do? What we got to do to get you a smiley face, man? And so he came home one day and he's like, guess what? Smiley face on his thumb. And he was so excited. And I'm telling you, all 10 of us danced all over that house screaming, just happy, good time. We called Grandma, Grandpa. We called everybody we knew. I showed you, look, I put it on Facebook. You got a smiley face on your thumb. Everybody's so proud of you. And he was proud of himself, buddy, too. And then the next day, he got a smiley face again. And so that's a big deal. Then he got the frowny face. We said, you tried, but you don't get a party today for that. And we kept going. We built up his self-confidence. And you guys can do that too, but you guys can build up other kids too. It doesn't just have to be the kids that live with you. My middle son one time held a door open for an older man in a gas station. And that older man just made over him like he was just the golden child. He said, oh, what a fine young man you're raising. You are a great young man, just such good manners. That's good to see you, refreshing. And man, I'm telling you, it boosted Dom's confidence from a 2 to a 10 for the rest of his life. Like he kept it after that. Like he was kind of down, head down a lot. But after that, man, it perked him up because he's not just hearing it from us anymore. He's hearing it from outside people. So I try to make it a point. If I see a kid doing something good and don't know the kid even, I'll comment, man, you're a good kid. Because sometimes they'll go their whole life and they won't hear it. And so, don't just build up the kids in your house, build up other kids too. And you might be doing, some parents out there a big solid favor on trying to boost some confidence. Because we all know when your parents say it, it doesn't mean as much as when somebody else says it. Consistency. Okay, so extreme behavior scenarios. I told you guys, my oldest daughter, she kind of has PTSD moments. She's a teenager now, and it still comes out sometimes. When she was younger, around 8 is when it first started to emerge, these behaviors, the self-destruction. She could punch through drywall like nothing. And people was like, well, it's easy to punch through drywall. But remember, she was 8 when she was doing this, okay? She could punch through drywall when she's mad. She'd rake her little face. Just mean. And it wasn't her. It was not her. And so a couple of things we learned to do was kind of watch for triggers. Okay, why is she doing this? We kind of kept a journal. We put it in our phone. Okay, today she got mad because we talked about shoes. And that would be it. And it took us a long time to figure out, okay, let's try to find a trend with this. So finally we noticed that, okay, it happened when she got in trouble. Duh, we already knew that. She's only doing it when she gets in trouble. But when we'd start to talk to her about it, she'd put her head down. Once she dropped her head, she's not listening anymore. She's done. We had to figure that out. It took a while again. But once we figured it out, okay, stop talking when she drops her head and give her an out. Okay, hey, you know what? I can see that you're really bothered right now, so I'm going to stop. Why don't you go sit on your bed, calm down for a little while. We'll talk about it later. We'll give her an out, okay? And sometimes you have to give kids an out like that. It's not cutting them a break because you better revisit that later. But once you see that trigger to that extreme behavior is getting ready to happen, stop it. Stop it right now. You're not helping them work through it by triggering this behavior. You're not be like, I'm going to trigger it and we're going to work through it. It's going to stop. It's not. It takes outside intervention. You're going to have to put them in counseling. They're going to need to talk to doctors, psychologists, years and years and years sometimes, depending on the child and what's happened to them. The behaviors, a lot of factors in there. You're not going to stop it by yourself at home.
Hey, Nikki, that's a really good time to bring up can you see the questions in the question box? I can read it if you can't easily see it.
I guess I can. The last one I saw was about the car.
Okay. One participant noted that, they wish it had better been communicated, when they were first trained about like what to do when a child, might need a restraint or is engaging in that kind of behavior. And then someone else commented, I'll just read it, as someone who's an EMT, we're not necessarily trained to handle children in crisis in the field. Most times there's an intervention by a medic to decide if actual soft or chemical restraints are necessary. Otherwise, it is a ride to the ER for them to handle it. As a foster parent, wouldn't it be better to try and de-escalate them in the home they may be comfortable, safe in? I know some kids seek going to the hospital over time and act out on purpose, and that was in reference particularly to group homes. So can you talk about like de-escalation as a parent versus, when you have to give up and call that ambulance? Mm-hmm.
Sure. So like I said, with that is we kind of learned our triggers. Sometimes the best way to prevent it or to stop it is to prevent it from happening with us. Because like I said, Addison had extreme stuff. Bloody face, it was awful. It was awful. I hate thinking about it, but we learned that trigger. So when she dropped the head, we give her the out. Okay, go sit down, calm down. Maybe we need to calm down. We might be coming across a little harsh to what you did for you. So let's go chill out with this for a minute. And we talked to her counselor. We've probably been with her through at least 10, 15 different counselors. We finally landed on one she likes that she'll actually talk to, and she's working through stuff again. They gave us strategies. There's the squared breathing that they teach you in trauma training. There's trying to ground them. Hey, talk to me about something you see in the room, because you could see it with our kid, with her especially. You could see just kind of, here it comes, it's getting ready to come a situation, and we've backed off. For de-escalation stuff, you kind of want to ground them. Like I said, the square breathing, where you breathe in real slow. What is it, 4 seconds? Hold it for 4. I can't remember. I haven't taught trauma in a while. You breathe in for 4. It's a deep breath. Hold it for about 4, and then exhale for 4. And then you wait for 4 seconds before you breathe in again. Now, when a kid's screaming at you, it's really hard to be like, do you breathe in? Because you can't, because they're screaming and things are usually crazy. And so you have to stay calm, because once you escalate your behavior, they're going to mirror what you do, or they're going to feed off of what you're doing. So if you're starting to yell and they start to yell back, and then here it comes, oh boy, you got to calm yourself down. We're all the adults here, and it's hard. It gets hard. Guilty again. I've been an escalator of situations, but you got to remember to stay calm. Time outs aren't only for the kids; they're for you guys too. Sometimes you got to step out and calm yourself down, because you're not going to be able to discipline effectively if you're out of control, or if you're upset and angry, right? And again, with teenagers, easy to get upset and angry and do stuff in anger, like take a phone for a year and a half. But you have to be the adult. We're all adults, right? You can't yell, especially with children that have been exposed to trauma. If you yell, they're going to yell, right? Because we react to those around us. So you have to stay clear, concise, try, soothing tones, talk to them. Thank you.
Sorry, pretzel breaths. Pretzel breaths is big in like daycare worlds. I just put that little link on there.
Pretzel breaths. See? There's all kinds of techniques. We did a lot of grounding. Hey, tell me what color that wall is right there. Can you smell anything? Do you smell dinner cooking? What do you smell? Do you smell flowers outside? What's the floor feel like? Because usually they're laying on the floor at this point. Is the carpet soft? Is the floor cold? What's it feel like? Tell me, and try to, deflect the situation to kind of calm them down. Now, when they're having behaviors like that, you're not going to get any discipline done, because they're not listening to you, and the stuff that happens, at least in my experience, they can't really control. So for that, there's a lot of I hate you, you're a terrible mother, blah, 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 blah. You're not in trouble for that. You're in trouble for what you were getting, whatever I was getting onto you for in the first place, but you're not in trouble for what you said during your moment of this escalation of bad behavior. But we're going to talk about what we're trying to originally talk about once you're done and calm down and everybody's calmed down. You as the parent have to be calmed down, as well as the child. So if you're talking to them about a situation, they get in trouble, and it's again with children that have extreme behaviors, and you see them, because we can all see triggers. Eventually, again, it took us a while. We had to keep a journal. And you start seeing that, okay, oh, the head's dropping, stop. You have to learn to see it yourself, because they're not going to be able to recognize it in themselves, especially if they're younger. And then once you get going to counseling and they actually have a counselor they're talked to, because again, we've been through a lot. My kids don't like talking to just anybody. It's got to be the perfect counselor, which is fine. I understand. I wouldn't want to, unload stuff on somebody I didn't feel comfortable with, right? The counselor is going to help them recognize it within themselves too. And again, it takes time, just like with anything, right? And the older they get, the better they should be getting at recognizing it within themselves. But you too, as the parent, the longer they're with you, the more obvious it's going to be, okay, they're getting ready to go into that. Now, sometimes kids in placement, like Rachel said, they'll do that just to get out to go to these hospitals and stuff. Again, with Addison, we had an incident, and she was in River Park for a few weeks after the incident. We couldn't handle it. She needed outside help. We knew we needed outside help. We reached out for outside help. She went to River Park. Loved River Park. Loved it. Was home for a little while. Things were good again. Then we had another incident. She didn't get to go to River Park the second time. She went to another hospital I won't name, because she didn't like it. She didn't like this other place, and called us first night, hey, come get me. I'm scared to death. We can't come get you. We can't. You have to do your therapy there. This is what happens. We can't pick and choose where you go. And for her, that was a wake up. She's like, I never want to go to that place again. What can we do? Well, tell us what we can do. Talk to me. Talk to me. What do I need to do to keep you from acting like that? What do you need to do with yourself? And she's like, I think I need a new counselor. We're like, all right, let's go. We'll shop around. And that's what we did. And since then we hadn't had any incidents. Of course, my kids are also very good at communication. When we've encouraged it from a young age. With back talk, I know a lot of people, if you say something and the child questions it, you want to shut it down, right? Because you don't want them to backtalk. But I want a little bit of backtalk, especially from a kid in foster care, because you don't want them to just accept everything that happens to them, do you? We don't. We don't want them to lay down and take whatever the world's going to push at them. You want a little bit of questioning, but within respectful lines. And that's where we've been blessed with our kids. Our kids will question it. That's why we like to explain the rules before, when we lay them out. Hey, here's a rule. We got a new one today. Here's why. Here's the rule. Here's why. Nice and simple. Now, when they get in trouble, if they question it, now, if you'll remember, when we made this rule, this is why. It's to keep you safe. A, B, C, D. Remember now? Okay. Don't question it anymore. And if they still, I don't get it, why I'm in trouble, then that's back talk. There's a difference. See, there's a difference between questioning why and back talk. So if it's back talk, you gotta draw the line on the back talk. But with the questioning, you want them to question, because again, these kids, they have the low self-esteem. They've come from the troubled background where we don't know everything that's happened to them, and we want them to question a little bit. Does it make sense? Does that make sense?
It does. And the question box is filling up. For the famous phone incident, which I have to think will be notorious in your family for decades.
Forever.
Was your daughter foster or adopted at that point? And would that have maybe been considered excessive if she was being fostered? Like, what might be a condition on grounding while fostering?
On grounding while fostering, she was adopted at that point. When we got our children, they did not have visits with their biological parents. That was already done. Rights were terminated by then. So with a child in foster care, that's where the line gets a little gray, because different cases have different expectations. They may have had their phone bought for them by their biological parents, right? And they may use that to communicate with their biological parents. So you have to go with what's in the case plan. So if the case plan says, hey, you can't take away the phone because they need to be able to communicate with, bio parents or whoever, then you can't take away the phone. You can shut off your Wi-Fi. And what I say is, if you have to have the phone, you don't really have to have access to all these websites. You don't have to have Snapchat, social media, and all this. We shut it down. There's a wonderful app out there called Circle. It's free, I think. I don't know. I don't pay the bills. I'm pretty sure it's free. And through our phone plan, when our kids get in trouble, we don't take their phones away anymore. Our teenagers, we don't. We just shut it down. We shut the phone down. They can call us. That's it. They can't send a text. They can't get on the internet. They can play games as long as the game doesn't need, internet to play the game. So they can still communicate. So with children in foster care, you have to look at what's in their case plan. If the case plan says they have to be able to have communication with biological parents through this cell phone, then, you can shut down the apps and stuff. I'm going to guess, especially with teenagers, they don't want that cell phone just to talk to their biological parents, because there's a lot of stuff that they like to do on their cell phone, little things called TikTok, Snapchat, all that fun stuff, right? Does that help?
So we are at the less than 10-minute mark. I'm going to let Nikki finish up with her outlined material, and then we will take questions for 15-20 minutes, as long as you guys keep them coming. So I'm not ignoring your questions. I was just going to let Nikki wrap up, and then we'll open it wide up for Q&A. Does that work, Nikki?
We're at the end.
Oh, well, perfect. Okay. Well, then I'm going to start throwing some questions at you.
All right.
Okay. So there was a question, and I will voice it here, but I don't think that we're qualified to answer. So if someone is trained in CPI, which I believe is a restraint training, the question was, are they permitted to use that instead of making a phone call? And I said that would probably be a question for an agency. I'm not totally comfortable answering that unless you know more than I do, Nikki.
It's in the policy that if you're the foster parent, you're not to restrain them. Okay. And that's how I read it. But again, I don't work for DHHR. I don't work for the agencies. Y'all work for us. I
think that would be a specific question for an agency. And then related to that question, Like what if a child has a weapon or you think they're imminently going to harm someone
Yeah,
else?
you have the right to self-defense and defense of others always,
Okay.
and you want to keep them from hurting themselves always.
Okay.
Like I said, we were guilty when she was hurting herself. We grabbed her little hands to stop her, and kind of stopped her from doing that, and then immediately called. I don't know how many times. Everybody on here, you have the number to the hotline, DHHR.
I can put it in the box. I also put in a link to the child crisis line, and I did mention that, DHHR really expanded access to that to address some of these situations.
Mhm.
Um, hey guys, if you have more questions, you can use that Q&A box or the chat.
I don't know. I
Um,
can't see it. Oh, there's a Q&A box.
there is. I've been handling it. It's good.
Okay.
Hey Nikki, here's a question I had. Your kids ever threatened to go live with their bio parents when they're mad at you?
We told them, yeah, they have. They have before, and we told them that's all well and fine. Once they turn 18, the choice is theirs. We've had it happen. I think maybe I've told you, our oldest son, when he turned 18, he had a lot of behavior, especially when we got older in high school. He's struggling with a lot. And he got in an argument with us one day and said, I'm going to go live with my biological mom. And we said, that's fine. You're 18. That's your choice to make. That's your choice to make. But we know that your biological mother is still on drugs. She's not being a very good citizen. She's breaking a lot of laws. That's just from what we see on the criminal websites and Facebook and hearing from your family. We want you to know that going into it. If you want to go live with your mother, that's fine because you're 18. And when you're ready to come back, you can come back, but we're not going to go back and forth on it. With our younger children, it's happened once to our below 18 children. And we said, again, because remember, if you remember back to the beginning, you don't want to say anything bad about their biological parents. I state facts. I see that your biological mother just got arrested a few weeks ago and that you're saying you want to go live with her. That's fine. You might want to wait till she's out of jail, but you're not going anywhere till you're 18. And I throw the facts out. And hope, they might be doing well. I see they're doing well now, but history tends to repeat itself a lot. So I like to give fair warning again, and I just state facts with them. Okay. One of them was, well, I'm going to live with my biological mom as soon as I turn 18. Cool, that's fine. That's your biological mom. I understand the want and desire to form a connection, rebuild that connection with her. That's fine. But she's telling you that she's not living with your father anymore, and that is not the case because here's her social media. Let me show you. And then that kind of stopped that. And just kind of got to point it out. It happens, and we say we are open to it. We are. I communicate with a couple members of my kids' biological families, and again, I'm not related by blood to my kids, but we do have relationships with acceptable family members that have reached out.
Will you come live at my house and be super nanny for a week and whip us into shape?
I'll send Louisa.
Okay, so keep the questions coming, guys, and I will just kind of fill in some gaps. So I'm definitely the softie in my family and definitely the inconsistent one. But I run into this problem, and I bet with 8 kids, you run into it more than I do. What about, do you ever have a situation where taking away a privilege you might feel like would punish the rest of the kids? Like you can't cancel that trip because you would disappoint 7 other kids, right? How do you
Right.
handle that?
Well, when we do trips, we don't buy our kids a lot of stuff through the year. Birthdays are big, Christmas is big, and then trips are where we cut loose. If a kid's riding with me, like we don't stop at the gas station and get candy and treats a lot. We're not big on that, unless we're celebrating something, you know, it's got to be a special occasion, really. So when we go on trips, we cut it loose on trips, like I said. So, and if we stop, the kids know if we stop, they're getting chips and candy and pop, and as long as they're not making themselves sick, we're probably going to get it for them and let them have it. But we don't have to. We don't have to do that. So if you're acting out beforehand, and I really don't think you deserve to have a lot of fun on this trip, you're going to come on trip with us, but you're going to get water, which is fine because you need water to survive. To drink, you're thirsty, have some water, right? And we're going to feed you, but you're not going to get candy because you don't have to have candy to live. You don't have to play on a tablet while we're driving to survive the trip. And if you act up, you're probably going to take a lot longer for you to get that tablet back on the ride. And I know you want that tablet on this long ride. And if we go somewhere fun, like a water park or an amusement park, I don't have to let you ride on every ride you want to go on. I don't really have to let you ride, but you're gonna come with us. We're gonna fight that because your brothers and sisters aren't gonna miss out because you're acting up. And we've done it, and that's where it comes in. Where it's really hard to do because you feel bad. You're like, we never go to Kings Island, but I told them that's where you got to watch yourself. Don't say you're not riding anything when we get there. Got to do a couple of rides. Keep it low. Because it does. It's hard to be and I'm the softie. I feel bad for my kids now because I'm the softie.
Here's a question. Tips on handling extreme aggression, pinching, punching, throwing objects. I've had spitting at my house. I'll add on.
I don't put up with that. We don't do well with that because Louisa, I think we talked about earlier. If you can't do something nice, don't do it. Right? That's the old adage. And so, if anything, again, bodies are precious, so you don't have the right to touch or hurt anybody else's body. So what's going to be the disciplinary action for that? I would talk to the kid about it. What do you think we should do? How would you feel? You have to spin it though, because they don't care about what they do to other people, right? I'm like, nothing, don't punish me. What do you think we should do to if somebody were to come and pinch you or bite you? What do you think we should do to them? And they'll tell you, but man, you should ground them. Well, how long? Okay, so that's the rule now. Anytime you guys kick, pinch, or bite, that's what's going to happen. Kids are creative with some punishments, but again, you have to help them see. You have to point it out to them. I was telling you about the basketball team, about the cheerleaders. I teach at Winfield High School. The cheerleaders went to the state tournament, and there's a bunch of boys that like to shoot basketball in the gym at lunch, right? And we're like, hey, they always ask us, and we usually don't let them do it the first half of lunch because people are eating and we don't want balls flying around hitting people. And so they came up and asked, can we shoot basketball today? We're like, no, actually the cheerleaders, we're going to send them off the state. We want you to cheer for them really loud. And they kind of rolled their eyes and did like that. And I was like, let me ask you a question. They're like, yeah, because one of them was a basketball player. I said, if you went to the basketball state championship, what would you expect from everybody? What would you do to the guy standing next to you? He goes, man, I'd shave my head bald if you guys made it to the state championship or to the state tournament. And I was like, you would? And he's like, yeah, it's a pretty big deal, right? And he's like, yeah, it's a big deal. I said, the cheerleaders are going to the state tournament. You're laughing it off. And put it into perspective for it. So sometimes you have to put things into perspective for your kids. If they're acting out and hitting and doing all this stuff, like, okay, not in the moment, later on, hey, what do you think we should do to somebody if they hit you? What do you think? Is that bad? Is that a mean thing to do? How would that make you feel? And again, not in the moment because they're going to know. They're going to know you're doing it because you hit somebody, but you have to kind of take them out of it and then put it in perspective later. And kind of, it does open their eyes, but it's not the cure-all for it. But if you talk to them in that moment too about what do you think we should do to them, sometimes it helps them later when they start doing it. Hey, you said that we should ground somebody for a month when they do that. Guess what, buddy? A month. And they're like, oh man. And it kind of helps them see. And it gives them a little personal accountability too.
All right.
That's what I do. Not an expert.
More experience than me. All right. So this is a two-parter. They mentioned following a foster adoptive mom on Instagram who suggests saying try again instead of saying no all the time. And that maybe that would save no for more urgent things like no, don't run in the street, versus no, don't throw that toy. Do you have any other tips like that? I feel like I've heard you say try again with your kids.
Yeah, try again. That's wrong. Well, I say try again a lot. When they come up with stuff, they'll tell a story that is not the story. And I always let them say it because they need to be heard. Their voices are important, right? They're trying to explain. We always give, hey, what's going on? We'll have 4 kids downstairs. Somebody starts screaming. You hear everybody start running up because they want to tell their story first, right? Oh, I'm not getting in trouble. We split them up. I treat them, I have a background in security forces, which is like the police. They teach us how to question suspects. So you got to split them up, right? Because if not, all their stories, it's going to be 3 on 1 almost every time if there's 4 kids or 2 against 1. And so we split them up, get the stories. Hey, tell me the story. And then we kind of piece together what happened, right? Because there's multiple witnesses. And so when they're telling, hey, you get the one that is actually the one breaking the rules, the bad guy in this situation, tell me what happened. They tell you the wrong thing. Maybe you should try again when you're telling me this, because we like the truth over a lie every time, and you get in less trouble for the truth. You're still going to get in trouble because you broke rules, but the truth will get you in less trouble if you tell it. Just come straight out with us, and that actually, when they get older, helps out a lot if you get it in there good young.
You
So,
got, oh, sorry. You
go
got,
ahead.
how about tips for like interrupting toddlers with, something that's not a no?
For toddlers, that's not a no. So we don't do that here. Let's try something else. Instead of throwing that toy, let's go over here. This toy is not a throwing toy. There's throwing toys. This is not it. This is a ground toy, and you kind of got to demonstrate with toddlers, because there's a big learning curve with toddlers, because you don't know if a 2-year-old's really on par with a 2-year-old cognitively, or if they're more younger. So you got to break it down real low for them. Okay, hey, this isn't an airplane. Don't throw that. And then there's also the mom voice. Like, my kids know the difference between a, hey, stop doing that, and a, no, don't do that, the emergency tone. So you got to really watch your tone with stuff too.
And then for timeouts, do you have parameters for how long a timeout should last?
We do it a minute per year, and then timeouts stop at a certain age. When a kid's too old for timeout. You can tell. I mean, obviously, usually about 6 years old, they start to outgrow the timeout and have more serious consequences because they're able to be responsible for their own actions a little better at this point, because they're in school, they're in kindergarten, first grade.
Okay, sorry, just working the question box here.
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay, just trying to clarify some things. How do you handle a 4-year-old in discipline timeout but doesn't express that they are sorry?
A lot of 4-year-olds don't. They don't. We try to get them. We try to talk to them again. We talk to our kids like they're adults. I don't know. There's been a few things out with us, but we speak to our toddlers like they're adults. Not like, hey, you need to go do your taxes. They're late this year. But no, hey man, don't treat your brothers and sisters like that. You really shouldn't throw tantrums like that, because that's not the way we act. This is how you should be acting. We kind of model it, but to force them to tell somebody they're sorry, we don't do, because they're not always sorry. They're not usually not sorry when you're making them say sorry. They're sorry that they got in trouble. And that's what they're sorry for. And it takes a long time to kind of learn that empathy for sorry. Does that make sense? It's hard to force a sorry.
I feel like there's more literature these days on empathy really being a learned behavior versus something we're just born with. I'm sure that's debatable, but
not everybody's born with empathy. Firsthand witness of that. They're not.
You think it can be taught?
I think it can. But you have to model it and really, again, make it hit home. Like, how would you feel? And again, in that moment, they're going to know that you're just doing it because I just did this to whoever. But later on, but man, how would you feel if somebody just came in and just started hitting you for no reason? What would that make you feel like? You kind of, because kids, again, you have to model behaviors, and it goes with emotions too. Some kids don't cry. Some kids have a hard time laughing at stuff that's funny. And so what we did, with ours, because we had a couple like that too. Again, big range of everything with ours. It's pointed out on TV. We're watching a show together. Be like, look at that person. They're crying. They must be sad. You think that's why they're crying? And kind of point it out that way. I wonder why they're sad. And it kind of really check and make them think about it. Oh, they are sad. Oh, and then and it makes them think. That's when you start their brain to thinking, okay, and make those connections that maybe they didn't make before. Does that help?
It does. Here's a good one that what if you want a kid to start doing something instead of stop?
We do a lot of suggesting. If we don't want to be harsh with it. Again, I got the military background. Liza grew up in a children's home, which was a lot harder than any military training I went through. So with them, if we want them to start something like their chores, again with chores, we had to set like if your chore's not done by the time we go to bed, then it's not done. You didn't do your chore that day, then you're going to be in trouble tomorrow for it. So if it's a younger kid and they have to have their chore done by 8:30, be like, you know what? it's almost 8:30. Did you do your chore yet? Hmm. If they're like, no, I didn't do it yet, I'm like, man, you don't have a lot of time left. I'm just saying. And like they kind of give them the responsibility without giving them the responsibility. See, I'm telling them to do the chore, but I'm putting it on them to do it. And it gives them a more like, oh yeah, it's time to redo my chore, guys. I'll be back. And they'll go do it. And then they kind of think, the younger they are, of course, that I did that on my own. And then they're going to start, okay, mom, last night at about 10 after 8, told me I should probably do my chore, and I haven't done it yet. It's about the same time. Eventually, they might start doing it. Some kids you got to remind their whole life, or give them again. There's consequences. You know, if you haven't started it by here, then you're going to be in trouble for it.
My son really wants to start his homework later. It's always later.
Later gets too late.
Yes,
I
it
do it with my school
does.
kids too.
All right, I think I've been kind of saving this one for last. Do you have any specific words of advice or words of wisdom? I have taken a lot away from this session, but wondering what you desire to be the biggest takeaway tonight.
Oh, the biggest takeaway, hands down, 100%, the biggest takeaway for discipline is consistency. You have to be consistent. Say what, mean what you say, and do it. You know, you have to follow through. If I tell my kids that this is the consequence for it, I have learned through a lot of trial and error, you have to follow through with it, and you don't set crazy consequences. You can't set big extreme ones. Like if you're going to a theme park, if you act up in the car, you ain't riding a ride till we get there. Because again, if you say it, you have to follow through with it. And do you really want to have that kid sit there the whole time and watch everybody else enjoy and have a fun day? Or do you want to include them in your family trip and have a good time? Like, all right, each time I get onto you, that's a ride. That's a ride you're not going to ride. And again, in the beginning, it's hard to do stuff like that because they're not going to believe you until you've been through it and they've seen that, okay, you're going to follow through with it every time. If you say something, you mean it. In the beginning, it's hard to do with fun stuff like that. So maybe steer away from that in the beginning if you're trying to establish, hey, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I mean it, until you've gone a couple rounds with it, with the smaller stuff around the house. Does that make sense? And so you have to stay consistent, stay consistent, and don't say anything that you don't mean. And so that really means you have to watch yourself.
That's my weak spot. I need to tattoo consistency on my arm. Okay, I said last question, but then I saw another good one. What do you do if a child laughs when being in trouble? It makes me more frustrated as a parent when they laugh instead of having sorrow, empathy. Is that normal for a 4-year-old, or does my child have emotional issues?
My kids are laughers. I have 2 that are laughers when they
You
get in trouble.
too.
Right in your face every time. You're like, right? I'm really giving you down the road and you're laughing at me. Sometimes they can't help it. Sometimes they can't help it. Sometimes it's a nervous reaction. You may have heard me laugh after I speak because it's a reaction that I have. I laugh a little bit after I talk with kids. But again, you know the difference between nervous reaction and I'm just going to laugh at what you're saying. Let them laugh. Let them laugh, and you have to bite your tongue. And I take that back to the military. I've been laughed at in my face in the military trying to get on to kids, trying to teach them this discipline stuff, right? And you really just want to just come unglued and yell, and I'm going to make you want something to laugh at. I'll make you laugh. We can get real funny. But you don't want to go there, right? Especially with kids that have been exposed to trauma, because that can get real scary once we start getting serious because we're mad as parents, right? And if you're mad as a parent, you're not going to be a very effective disciplinarian. You're going to end up in a situation where you take a phone away for a year and a half. I mean, is the lesson lost after that long? Yeah, it was lost a little bit, but then also there was a big lesson for her and the rest of the kids. Mom took her phone away for a year and a half because she said she would. I ain't messing with that. Right? So when they laugh at you, say, if it's coming from a place of just trying to be a smart aleck, say, okay, well, that's another one. When they ask another what, it's another whatever you're going to punish them with in that moment. If you're going to ground them for a day, that's another one. Another what? That's another day grounded because you're laughing at me. And kids, if you stay real, just the tone I'm using right now, that's a lot more effective than yelling at them. If I'm yelling at my kids, they're like, oh, she's yelling, she doesn't mean it, whatever. But if I'm like this, nice and calm, cool, and collected, and you're laughing at me, all right, that's fine. If you want to laugh, we're going to add another day. Oh, you're still laughing? I guess that's 3. Do you want to go for 4, or do you want to go sit in a room and think about it for a minute? Usually by then it's going to calm down, especially if there's been consistency in the past, because they just know at this point, laughing stops. We still get it from our youngest, but I mean, she's a real hard line pusher right now. Plus, she's the baby. They're always ornery.
Oh, I have a laugher, and I'm pretty sure they're trying to make my head explode. So my sympathy to the family with that question. I didn't mean to take it lightly.
I hope that helps.
I've had the same thought, like, is something very wrong with this child that this is their response? But I think my child's trying to get a reaction out of me, and I
Don't give it
take
to
the
them.
bait way more than I should.
Don't give them the reaction. And sometimes they do try to get your reaction. When they yell, they want you to yell back at them. When they laugh at you, they want you to yell at them. Don't give them the satisfaction. Remember, not nice and calm, cool, collected like this. It's a lot more effective than yelling and screaming, and kicking and hollering, right? So you got to stay cool. And if you're mad, you're not going to be able to be effective with it. So sometimes, again, timeouts are for you too.
Really good advice. I think we have reached about the end of our training. I've had a lot of questions about credits, certificates, things like that. It's totally fine if you are a couple and you're both, sitting in front of the same screen, signed in once. What we do after this is we send out a certificate, and it's just blank. So you fill your own name in, so you can print it twice, put both couples' names. If your agency needs something more specific, I am happy to send out an email directly to your worker that says, hey, so-and-so was on this training. Anyone who signed in through Zoom, I have all of your emails. We will get a post-attendee email out either tomorrow or the next day. It'll have that certificate. I'm going to send out some of the things that we shot into the chat box today. I'm going to send the DHHR discipline policy. Anything else Nikki and I decide was referenced tonight or might be helpful, we'll throw that in the email. I just want to give people a heads up. That'll come from a Mission West Virginia email address, but every once in a while it'll go into your junk mail. So check your junk mail if you feel like you haven't gotten it by Friday morning, and feel free to email me. I'm going to put my email and also Nikki's email in this box. And there was at least one question that I said, hey, I think Nikki can address that personally. So we will follow up with you, or if you're one of those folks, feel free to email Nikki or myself. Just if you have an individual question, we're happy to handle it that way.
They're not experts, but I have a lot of experience, right?
She certainly does. Thanks to everyone for joining us. This will also be recorded, so if you know somebody who missed it, we can send them a link. And I think that is all, but grab our emails and feel free to, I'll also put the office number in here. We're still on a COVID schedule where I'm only in office 2 days a week, but tomorrow's my office day. So here is the phone number if anybody wants to give me a call. And thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming in. We might be doing another one of these soon.
That's right.
Yep, we're talking
Yep,
about
I
that.
think we're going to offer up another training. Nikki is an expert on many things. And so you'll be on the list for our next webinars, and actually have some upcoming with a few other experts as well. So we'll make sure that you guys get those notices. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.